Emma Collins was exhausted. It had been one of those mornings that felt endless before they even began. Alarm blaring at 4:45 a.m., coffee spilled across her blazer, and a taxi ride through the gray drizzle of Detroit that made her shiver to the bone. By the time she boarded Delta Flight 409 to Atlanta, she was running purely on caffeine and habit. She slumped into seat 22F, the middle seat thankfully empty, and sank into the cushion like a small boat finding its harbor. The hum of the jet and the faint aroma of recycled air and coffee made her eyelids heavy. She pulled out her earbuds, cradling them in one hand, and adjusted her neck pillow with the other. The passengers around her were immersed in their routines, toddlers whining in adjacent seats, businessmen tapping furiously on laptops, couples arguing softly over shared screens, and a flight attendant repeatedly reminding someone to store their luggage securely. It was ordinary, comfortable, even in a way that allowed her to relax into the comforting monotony of air travel. Emma's mind drifted to mundane thoughts, meetings waiting in Atlanta, her grocery list, her dog left alone at home, until the plane lurched slightly as it began its ascent. The engines roared to life beneath the cabin floor, a steady vibration traveling up through the seats. She tried to focus on the novel she'd downloaded on her tablet, but the hum of the engines and the gentle rocking lulled her closer to sleep than she had planned. And then it happened. A voice, not the normal pre-flight or seatbelt announcement, but something that cracked the usual rhythm of the cabin, sharp, urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation on board. Is there a Delta Force sniper aboard?" The words ripped through the cabin air like a gunshot. Emma's earbuds fell to her lap. Her head snapped up. Passengers froze mid-action, the murmurs of the cabin replaced by a silence so sudden it seemed unnatural. A toddler cried in protest. The laptop screens that had been glowing softly now reflected the confusion etched on every passenger's face. Emma's pulse kicked into high gear. She had spent years in military service, trained in tactics, stealth, and high-pressure decision-making, but this was a context she had never imagined, a commercial jet. Surrounded by ordinary civilians, none of whom had the faintest clue what she could do, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. Her training screamed at her to move, to assess, to prepare, but she had to appear calm, invisible even, because nothing about her past could be revealed now. Not yet. The passengers were reacting in real time. Some whispered frantically to neighbors. Others grabbed phones, calling loved ones, their faces drained of color. A man in row 18 dropped his coffee cup, shattering porcelain across the floor. The scent of burnt espresso mingled with recycled cabin air, creating an almost surreal backdrop to the chaos. Emma took a deep breath. Her eyes scanned the cabin. Who was this announcement meant for? A Delta Force sniper on a commercial plane was improbable, almost comical, but the tone in the pilot's voice brooked no humor. This was serious. She felt her stomach tighten. Somewhere near the front of the plane, the cockpit was locked, but the voice of the captain carried urgency and a subtle note of fear. Passengers began to speculate, their voices rising in panic. Terrorist, hijacker, bomb. Words, loud and chaotic, bounced off the overhead compartments. Emma's mind raced to calculate possibilities. A single armed threat in the first few rows could have catastrophic consequences, and if there were more than one, the plane could descend into an unimaginable nightmare in seconds. Her training took over. She began scanning the aisle, counting, noticing subtle shifts in body language. The man adjusting his sleeve in row 5. The woman in row 7 clutching her handbag too tightly, shifting in a way that seemed off. Not because they were suspicious. They weren't. But because instinctively trained instincts kicked in, and she was already mapping threats in a spatial grid. Somewhere behind her, someone whispered, "Did he really just say Delta Force?" The word sent a ripple through the cabin. Nobody wanted to believe it, yet the pilot's authority, calm yet commanding, left no room for denial. Emma's heart raced. She could feel it thundering in her chest, a drumbeat of anticipation, fear, and focus. The flight attendants were visibly shaken. Two of them exchanged quick, worried glances, their hands hovering over the intercom buttons, unsure what to do next. Passengers clutched each other's arms, some crossing themselves, others muttering prayers under their breath. The cabin smelled faintly of fear, perfume, and fast food breakfasts, an odd combination that made Emma's stomach churn. And then she noticed it, the subtle way the man in the aisle ahead moved. Not hurried but deliberate, measured, and oddly too calm. A trained observer might miss it entirely, but Emma had been trained to notice patterns, the pause in his step, the careful positioning of his hand near the zipper of his jacket, the slight glance to the side as if gauging reactions. Her gut twisted. She shifted slightly in her seat, ensuring her jacket covered the sidearm strapped discreetly to her thigh. Though her Delta Force background was classified and known to very few, her skills were still alive in her muscles, ready to respond with reflexes honed through years of drills and real-life operations. But no one here could know that. Not yet. The pilot's voice cut through again, tight and clipped. "We need trained personnel immediately. This is not a drill. If you are trained in tactical response, report now." Emma's eyes widened. 1,000 thoughts collided at once. She could remain anonymous. She could stay in her seat and pretend to be an ordinary passenger, but that could cost lives. Hundreds of lives. The cabin, filled with sleeping, texting, and dozing strangers, depended on someone stepping up, and the burden of that responsibility hit her like a punch to the chest. Her fingers twitched, ready to react, but she stayed still, calculating, weighing her options. The threat could be anyone. The pilot had no idea who among them had the experience to handle a crisis, and if Emma revealed herself too soon, it might trigger panic or worse, provoke the threat. Emma took a steadying breath. She lowered her eyes to her hands for a split second, feeling the smooth leather of her seatbelt strap, counting her breaths. 1, 2, 3. She had to move strategically, like a chess player thinking 5 moves ahead. Passengers around her continued to speculate. Who could it be? Is it real? Is this some kind of joke? But Emma knew it was not a joke. The tension in the pilot's voice, the unshakable authority, the pause before each word, it all told her that the situation was serious, deadly serious. And just as she leaned slightly forward, trying to assess the threat further, the pilot's voice returned, louder this time, more insistent. "Is there a Delta Force sniper aboard? I need immediate confirmation. Lives are at stake." Emma's stomach tightened into a knot. She could no longer pretend. Someone had to act, but revealing herself too soon could either save or doom everyone on board. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath, waiting for an answer no one could give. Emma's hand hovered near her concealed weapon, her heart racing. Outside, the clouds stretched endlessly, a serene blue sky completely at odds with the chaos inside the cabin. She realized in that moment that nothing about this flight would ever be ordinary again. She inhaled sharply. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and everything could spiral into disaster. And then she felt it, a subtle shift in the aisle ahead, a movement almost too quick to notice. The threat wasn't just an abstract idea anymore. It was real. Emma tightened her jaw and whispered under her breath, almost to herself, almost as a promise. "This ends with me." The plane rattled slightly, passengers fidgeted, and the pilot's voice cut through once more, tense, urgent, unyielding. "Delta Force sniper, we're counting on you, now." Emma froze. Every instinct screamed at her that this was only the beginning. Emma's heart was a drum in her chest, pounding louder than the engines beneath the cabin floor. She sat frozen for a split second, letting the pilot's words sink in. "Delta Force sniper now." The phrase repeated like a pulse in her mind. Her training, honed over years of silent drills and high-stakes operations, screamed at her, move, assess, neutralize, but this was not a simulation. This was a plane, 35,000 feet above the ground, with hundreds of lives in her hands. Around her, panic spread like wildfire. The murmurs of confusion became a cacophony of whispers, gasps, and low sobs. A woman in row 21 clutched her purse like it was a lifeline, her knuckles white. A man in row 20 tried to calm his daughter but ended up shaking with her. The toddler in row 19 wailed, oblivious to the danger, a small, innocent heartbeat in the middle of chaos. Emma's mind raced. She had to act strategically. She couldn't just announce herself, it would provoke panic, and the threat could act immediately if exposed. She slid her gaze down the aisle, taking mental notes. A man in row 5 was shifting nervously, his hand near the zipper of his jacket. A woman in row 7 had her legs crossed tightly, scanning the aisle in short, jerky glances. Not because they were dangerous, Emma knew that, but because their nervous energy changed the dynamics of the cabin. Every second counted. A threat anywhere in the plane could strike in an instant. She adjusted her posture, subtly ensuring her jacket covered the sidearm she carried discreetly. Her mind ran tactical simulations, the threat's possible position, his speed, his weapon type, and the optimal method to neutralize him without collateral damage. Hundreds of lives depended on perfect execution. The flight attendants were trembling. One whispered urgently to another, glancing toward the cockpit as if hoping the problem would vanish. Do we tell them to stay seated? Emma thought. Number panic spreads faster than bullets. Passengers were beginning to murmur amongst themselves. Is this a joke? Someone asked loudly from row 12. Is this real? The woman next to Emma shook her head, her voice tight. It has to be a joke. Delta Force on a commercial flight. Really? Emma bit back a wry thought. If only they knew her life in the shadows of classified operations where she had been invisible by choice was now colliding violently with the mundane, unsuspecting world. Her civilian identity, the tired commuter, the office analyst, was gone. It had been stripped away in an instant. A subtle movement near the front of the plane caught her attention. A figure, dark-haired, wearing a bulky jacket, moved in a manner that was too controlled for an ordinary passenger. His steps were measured, scanning the cabin with a deliberate calm. Her heart skipped a beat. This was no amateur. Emma took a steadying breath, sinking low in her seat. The training kicked in. She imagined herself moving silently, calculating every motion, every shift of the legs, every sway of the arms, every potential line of sight from the cabin windows to the aisle. Every detail mattered. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom again, tense, clipped, each word like a hammer striking steel. We have an armed threat moving toward the cockpit. Trained personnel respond immediately. Time is critical. Emma froze. The words were no longer hypothetical. Someone was actually advancing toward the cockpit with intent. Her fingers twitched under her jacket, her hands itching to act. She needed to move carefully but decisively. Passengers were reacting unpredictably. A man in row 14 had stood abruptly, spilling coffee over the aisle. A woman in row 10 screamed, her voice shattering the fragile calm that had clung to the cabin since takeoff. Emma's eyes scanned every inch of the aisle, counting passengers, identifying clear lines of sight, mentally mapping the safest, most efficient path to intercept the threat. She whispered to herself almost like a mantra, stay calm. One wrong move, it's over. One wrong calculation, hundreds die. Emma slid her gaze to the man near row 5 again. His hand was near his jacket's inner pocket. He was moving faster now, deliberately, with a rhythm she recognized. Training told her, watch his eyes, watch his hands, predict the trajectory. Her pulse synced with the silent rhythm of tactical calculation. The flight attendants had now stopped moving entirely. Their wide eyes darted between passengers and the aisle. Some passengers were frantically calling loved ones. Others whispered, some prayed. But Emma had to stay invisible. She couldn't reveal herself yet, not until she fully assessed the threat. Her mind raced. What if there were more than one? What if the pilot's announcement was a trap? Every scenario she had trained for flashed in her mind. Hostage situations, ambushes, multiple attackers. She counted the seconds since the pilot's first warning. Less than 5 minutes had passed, but the intensity of danger was multiplied exponentially in her mind. Then she noticed it, a glint of metal near the man's hand, a small reflection from a weapon partially concealed, not fully visible but enough to confirm her worst fear. This was armed and he was approaching the cockpit. Her body went into silent, rehearsed motion. Heart racing, she shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting the balance of her body for stealth. Her sidearm pressed gently against her thigh, ready. The cabin's chaos faded around her, reduced to background noise. All that mattered was the threat in front, the lives behind her, and the precious seconds slipping away. Emma whispered under her breath, so quiet no one could hear, "This ends with me. No one else can save them if I fail." A flight attendant, perhaps sensing the growing urgency, edged toward the aisle, her movements cautious, hesitant. Emma noted her position, calculating how to intercept the threat without endangering the innocent. And then, in a horrifying instant, the man's eyes flicked up. For a fraction of a second, recognition passed between them, a silent acknowledgement. Emma's stomach dropped. He had sensed her presence. Not fully, not yet, but enough to alter the dynamics of the encounter. Passengers, oblivious, continued to react in panic, unaware that the predator and the trained operative were now locked in a silent, deadly game. The man adjusted his jacket, his hand inching closer to whatever he concealed. The cockpit door loomed ahead, locked, but the target within reach. The pilot's voice over the intercom shattered the tense quiet, urgent and insistent. "Time is critical. The threat is moving faster than anticipated. Delta Force sniper, respond now." Emma's pulse roared in her ears. She had no choice. Her decision was immediate. Move, intercept, protect. Delay meant lives lost. Every second was a heartbeat, every heartbeat a potential catastrophe. She slid slightly out of her seat, pressing low, careful to avoid attracting attention. The cabin seemed to hold its breath along with her. Sweat ran down her temple, her pulse hammering, her training guiding her every motion. And then the man moved again, swift, deliberate, intent clear in every calculated step. He was closer to the cockpit than anyone suspected. Emma's jaw tightened. She whispered under her breath, a promise to herself and to the strangers she would protect. "I've got this." The plane rattled as turbulence hit unexpectedly, a sudden jolt that sent coffee cups flying and passengers shrieking. In that split second, everything became more urgent. Emma's hand brushed her weapon. She was ready. The threat was inches from the cockpit. And then the pilot's voice, calm but deadly serious, pierced the cabin again. "Delta Force sniper, it's now or never. Lives are in your hands." Emma froze, the weight of responsibility crashing into her chest. Hundreds of eyes might not be on her, but the fate of everyone aboard hung on her next move. Emma's mind moved faster than her heartbeat. She had trained for high-stakes situations, but this was unlike any operation she had ever faced. A confined metal tube 35,000 feet above the ground, packed with civilians unaware of the danger around them. One wrong move, and the entire plane could erupt into chaos. Hundreds of lives were literally in her hands. Her eyes stayed locked on the figure moving toward the cockpit. Dark jacket, calculated steps, hands hidden just enough to conceal the weapon she had glimpsed before. There was no hesitation in his stride. He was confident, calm, and deadly, a predator in human form. Emma's training kicked in. Assess, predict, intercept. She slid her gaze along the aisle, calculating distances, angles, obstacles. Overhead bins loomed like barriers. Seat rows narrowed the space, creating a bottleneck perfect for tactical advantage or disaster if she miscalculated. The passengers around her were still mostly unaware, whispering anxiously among themselves, clutching phones or hands of strangers. She noted each movement, every distracted glance, every shuffling foot, every hesitant breath. Emma's hand hovered near her concealed sidearm, but she knew drawing it prematurely could provoke the man into action. The goal was precision, not panic. She needed to neutralize him before he reached the cockpit. Her training whispered through her nerves, patience, Timing, control. The pilot's voice over the intercom returned, tighter now, each word sharp and urgent. "There's an armed threat approaching the cockpit. I need someone trained to stop him. Delta Force sniper, I'm counting on you. Lives depend on this." Emma's pulse quickened. This was not just a threat to the plane. This was a test of her instincts, her training, every skill she had honed in secret. She inhaled slowly, letting her mind align with muscle memory. Every step, every breath, every decision needed to be flawless. The man shifted slightly, scanning the cabin with a predator's focus. He hadn't noticed her fully, but she could feel his awareness expanding, a creeping suspicion that someone was watching. Emma lowered herself slightly in her seat, pressing herself against the frame, invisible in plain sight. Her eyes tracked every motion, his head tilt, the rhythm of his steps, the subtle twitch of his shoulder. Passengers began to stir. Some were noticing the tension, whispering among themselves. The cabin had transformed from a mundane travel experience into a pressure cooker of fear, but still, they didn't know the precise danger. Emma felt the weight of their ignorance. They had no idea that a trained operative, seated quietly among them, was the only barrier between them and disaster. She adjusted her jacket, making sure her sidearm remained completely hidden. The man's approach accelerated slightly. He was closer to the cockpit now, within 10 feet. Emma's mind ran a quick calculation. One misstep and the weapon could be drawn. She needed to intercept here and now, but the aisle was tight, the passengers around her unpredictable. Then she noticed the flight attendants frozen in the aisle. They had no idea what to do. One made a hesitant move toward the man, perhaps thinking to distract him, and Emma realized how dangerous that could be. A civilian's intervention might trigger a violent response. She needed to act before anyone else inadvertently became a casualty. Emma whispered to herself, a mantra she repeated in high-stress drills: calm, focus, execute. Her muscles tensed, ready for action. She knew the man would reach the cockpit in seconds if left unchecked. She had to move now. Sliding low, she shifted through the narrow aisle, moving as silently as possible. Each passenger was a potential obstacle, but also a shield. She used them strategically, aligning herself so that the threat wouldn't immediately spot her approach. Her eyes never left him. Her brain was a calculation engine. Speed, distance, potential reactions, escape routes, all processed in a fraction of a second. The man's hand shifted near his jacket again, fingers brushing the concealed weapon. Emma's breath hitched. Time slowed, each second stretching into eternity. Her mind raced through every possible scenario. Draw her weapon now, delay a second longer, aim for disarm or immobilization, protect civilians. She decided, delay precision. Emma edged closer, the man unaware of the silent predator approaching from behind. She could see the cockpit door just beyond him, the barrier to the pilot. One step closer, and he could attempt entry. One miscalculation, and the plane could descend into tragedy. Suddenly, a loud clatter echoed, an overhead bin popped open unexpectedly. Emma froze, heart leaping. The man's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing. He adjusted slightly, still not fully aware of her, but suspicion flickered. Emma tensed, ready to act at a moment's notice. Passengers gasped, some shrieked. A woman cried out, clutching her child. Emma's mind recalibrated instantly, distraction. Protect civilians, neutralize threat. Every detail mattered. Every movement could save or endanger lives. The man moved again, closer to the cockpit. Emma's muscles coiled like springs, every nerve sharp, every sense alert. Her hand brushed her sidearm under the jacket. Her mind rehearsed the motion. Draw, aim, disarm, protect. Seconds now measured in heartbeats. The pilot's voice cut through the tension, urgent, clipped, commanding. Time is critical. The threat is moving faster than anticipated. Delta Force sniper, respond immediately. Emma's stomach twisted. The cockpit was just a few steps away. The man's confidence was palpable. He didn't know she was there, but that could change everything in a split second. She had one chance to act. 1. Her hand moved subtly, brushing the weapon into firing position. She could feel the weight of the lives behind her, the plane around her, the seconds slipping away. Every fiber of her being was tuned to this one purpose: stop him before it was too late. The man shifted again, closer still, unaware of the silent storm approaching from behind. Emma's mind raced through contingencies. One wrong move, weapon discharged too early, innocent lives struck, panic erupting, could end in disaster. Her jaw tightened. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Passengers were oblivious, whispering, clutching phones in hands, not realizing how close the danger was. She slid slightly closer, keeping low, timing every breath, every movement, every reaction. And then, in that instant that felt like eternity, the man's eyes flicked toward her. Recognition, a flicker of suspicion, passed briefly across his features. Emma froze, calculating. He hadn't fully detected her yet, but now the dynamics had shifted. One wrong twitch could provoke him. Her muscles tensed. Fingers flexed around the grip of her weapon. Her breath slowed, aligning with her heartbeat. One step, one calculation, one motion, that would determine everything. The plane shuddered as turbulence hit unexpectedly, sending a tray table clattering and passengers gasping. Emma's eyes never left him. She whispered under her breath, "This is it, one move, I've got this." And then the pilot's voice, calm but deadly serious, echoed over the intercom. "Delta Force Sniper, report status. Lives are on the line now." Emma's eyes narrowed. Time had stopped and raced all at once. The threat was inches from the cockpit, the lives of everyone aboard balanced on a knife's edge. One miscalculation and it would all collapse. She tightened her grip. Every instinct, every ounce of training, every reflex was ready. And in that suspended moment, the entire plane held its breath, unknowingly waiting for a single action that would change everything. Emma's mind was a perfect storm of calculation and instinct. Every second stretched into a lifetime. The man was only a few steps from the cockpit, and the lives of 187 passengers, adults, children, elderly, hung in fragile balance. Her body, honed by years of clandestine operations, was ready. Training overrode hesitation. Move, protect, neutralize. She slid low in the aisle, her jacket hiding the outline of her sidearm. The man's back was partially turned, giving her a small advantage. Emma's eyes darted from him to the passengers, ensuring she would not endanger anyone as she closed the distance. A toddler in row 19 whimpered, oblivious to the unfolding danger. A mother clutched her child tighter, her wide eyes darting toward the aisle. Emma memorized every detail, every position, every variable. The man shifted slightly, hands brushing against his jacket's inner pocket. The faint glint of metal confirmed her worst fear. He was armed, ready, and moving with intent. He had the confidence of a predator, unhesitant and precise. Emma counted heartbeats, timing his steps and aligning her movement to intercept without drawing attention or risking collateral damage. Passengers were now whispering nervously, some noticing the tension but none realizing the true danger. One man fumbled with his phone, raising it to take a photo or video, completely unaware of the risk. Emma's instincts screamed at her, distraction, protect civilians, neutralize threat. She inched closer, her movements nearly imperceptible, silent, ghost-like. The man's eyes flicked around the cabin as he advanced. Emma could see the slight shift of his weight, the tension in his shoulders, the subtle anticipation in his step. She adjusted her approach, crouching low, ready to spring. Her grip tightened on the concealed weapon. One move, one chance. Suddenly, a clatter erupted from row 10. A tray table dropped, metal scraping against the floor. The man's head snapped in that direction, eyes narrowing. His awareness was growing. Emma froze, timing her next motion. She could feel the seconds ticking like the seconds on a bomb, each one carrying more weight than the last. She slid forward, low and silent, using the passengers as shields. Her movement was precise, calculated. The man remained partially unaware of her presence, distracted by the ambient chaos. A faint pulse of adrenaline surged through her veins, sharpening her senses to an almost supernatural level. Every muscle, every nerve, every reflex was alive and ready. The cockpit door loomed ahead, just beyond the man. One more step, and he could attempt to force entry. Emma's training dictated she intercept now, in the confined space of the aisle, minimizing risk to everyone else. She calculated angles, positioning herself to block his path while maintaining full control over her own line of sight. Passengers continued to fidget, unaware of the deadly ballet unfolding just feet away. One woman gasped, holding her handbag tightly against her chest. A man whispered something to his companion, shaking his head. Emma's mind raced. Any sudden movement from them could escalate the situation, and she had to anticipate it all. Then the man reached into his jacket. His fingers brushed against the weapon again. Emma's pulse surged, but her expression remained calm, almost casual. One wrong step could trigger a catastrophic response. She whispered under her breath, "Steady, control, neutralize." Sliding into position, she crouched just behind him. Her hand brushed against the grip of her weapon, hidden under the jacket. She could feel the heat of tension radiating off the man, the subtle sway of his body as he moved toward the cockpit. Her decision had to be instantaneous. Emma's training told her, wait until the perfect moment, then act decisively. She aligned herself, ready to move, ready to strike, ready to protect every life in the cabin. Her muscles coiled like springs. The man's confidence made him dangerous, but predictable. Then the plane jolted slightly with turbulence, passengers gasping and clutching armrests. The man's focus faltered for a fraction of a second. Emma seized it. Every instinct screamed, now. With a fluid motion, she stepped forward, pressing her body against his back. Her hands moved with precision, aiming to control and disarm. The metal glint of his weapon was barely visible, but she knew its exact location. In one calculated sweep, she twisted his wrist, redirecting the weapon away from the cockpit, ensuring no one else could be harmed. The man stumbled, instinctively reacting, but Emma was already in control. Her body pressed him against the aisle, leveraging her weight to immobilize him without drawing attention from passengers. A quick, silent sweep of her other hand ensured the weapon was secured. Passengers were still unaware. A few glanced up nervously, sensing tension but oblivious to the intervention. Emma's heart pounded, but her movements remained precise, controlled. She whispered under her breath, "Not over. Watch for more." The man struggled briefly, but Emma's grip was unyielding. Her training and experience gave her the edge. Every muscle, every reflex, every ounce of her focus was channeled into maintaining control without escalating the situation. Then a sudden sound. A passenger's phone dropped to the floor made him jerk, eyes scanning wildly. Emma's grip tightened instantly, controlling his movements. She could feel the tremor of panic in his body, the subtle shift of his weight. Her mind raced. One man neutralized, but there could be others. Stay alert, protect, control. She slid backward slightly, using him as a shield between the cockpit and any potential threat. The pilot's voice cut through the cabin again, calm but urgent. "Sniper, report status. Is the threat secured? We're approaching the airbase. Land safely." Emma's muscles remained tense. "One neutralized," she whispered under her breath, scanning the cabin. Unknown if alone, eyes on everyone. Her pulse still raced, adrenaline surging, but she maintained the composure necessary to act decisively. The man in her control began to calm, recognizing he had been outmatched. Emma didn't let go. The cockpit remained her priority. Any sudden resistance could jeopardize the plane. She pressed him slightly forward, ensuring the cockpit remained inaccessible. Passengers shifted nervously, sensing tension but still unaware of the silent war occurring steps away. A woman held her child tightly, whispering reassurances that seemed hollow in the electric atmosphere. Emma's gaze swept across the aisle, counting and memorizing positions. nodding who might be a danger or obstacle in the final moments before landing. Then another subtle movement caught her eye, a shadow near the overhead bins, half hidden by luggage. Her pulse quickened. Secondary threat. She couldn't afford to ignore it. One man neutralized, but there could be more. Her body coiled again, ready to react instantly. The plane's descent intensified. Passengers leaned forward, unaware of the precise danger just beyond their line of sight. Emma's instincts screamed. The fight wasn't over. Every second mattered. One misstep, one unnoticed threat could undo everything. She whispered again under her breath, "Not done, stay sharp, eyes open." The man under her control squirmed slightly, tension radiating off him, but she maintained control, silent and precise. The cockpit remained secure, but the shadows hinted at more danger lurking. The pilot's voice came over again, calm yet tense. "Sniper, prepare for final approach. Is everyone safe? Report immediately." Emma's grip tightened on the man, scanning every inch of the cabin. The first move had succeeded, but the threat was not fully contained. Something told her there was more, something she hadn't anticipated. Her heart pounded, her muscles remained coiled. The lives of hundreds rested on her next move. And then a faint shift. A subtle figure moving behind the last row, eyes darting, hands partially concealed. Emma's pulse surged. She wasn't finished yet. Emma's heart thumped in her chest like a warning drum. The first threat neutralized, she barely allowed herself a moment of relief before her instincts screamed, "There's more." Her eyes locked on the subtle movement near the last row, where a shadow shifted just beyond the reach of cabin lights. The plane rattled slightly with turbulence. Passengers gripping armrests, oblivious to the storm brewing silently around them. Every second mattered. Emma's muscles coiled, ready to spring. The first threat had been controlled swiftly, surgically, but the secondary figure, small, deliberate, and dangerous, posed a new challenge. Unlike the man near the cockpit, this one had been quiet, blending into the cabin's chaos, waiting for the right moment. Emma knew from experience that patience was essential, but the window for action was narrowing fast. She inched down the aisle, crouching low, scanning each passenger, each obstacle. Her eyes flicked to a young mother in row 23, gripping her infant tightly, eyes wide with fear. Another couple in row 21 whispered frantically, phones pressed to ears, completely unaware that lives hung in the balance. Emma's mind calculated every possible trajectory, where the secondary threat might move, what tools he might have concealed, and how civilians might inadvertently become targets. Her hand hovered over her concealed weapon, ready to act with precision. She had trained for years in situations like this, hostage containment, neutralization, defensive maneuvers, but never in a crowded commercial aircraft. Every motion needed to be exact. One slip, one misjudged step, and the lives of hundreds could be lost. The shadow moved again, deliberate, hands brushing against the luggage compartment. Emma recognized the subtle indicators of trained intent, measured breathing, calculated pauses, scanning the environment. Whoever this was had military or tactical experience. That realization sent a chill down her spine, but also sharpened her focus. This wasn't luck or chaos, it was methodical, and she could counter methodical. She whispered under her breath, aligning herself with the cabin's layout. Slow, steady, precision, protect. Her body slid low, one step at a time, each movement silent, ghost-like. Passengers around her shifted nervously, but none suspected the deadly chess game unfolding inches from their seats. Emma caught a faint glint, a metallic reflection from the secondary figure's hand. He was armed. Again. Her pulse spiked. This wasn't just a test of skill, it was a race against time. The plane's descent continued, the cockpit secured for now, but a misstep anywhere could trigger catastrophe. The first threat, immobilized near the cockpit, shifted slightly, sensing the tension. Emma adjusted, maintaining control. She had no margin for error. One sudden movement could escalate the situation. Her training dictated calm, precise pressure, and she applied it flawlessly. Meanwhile, the secondary threat crept closer to the center of the plane, moving along the aisle with stealth. Emma analyzed his path, predicting his next move. Intercept before he reaches the front. Control the weapon. Protect the innocent. Every ounce of her focus was consumed by this calculation. The passengers were beginning to notice something was wrong. Whispered speculations arose. What's happening? Is this a hijacking? A few glanced anxiously at the cockpit door, but none could grasp the full scope. Emma's mind calculated contingencies: how to maintain cover, how to protect civilians, and how to disarm the threat without firing a single shot if possible. The secondary figure's hand brushed against a concealed weapon again. Emma's muscles coiled. She needed to act decisively now. Delay could allow him to reach the cockpit, or worse, panicking passengers might unintentionally trigger an event. She whispered to herself, control, precision, neutralize. Sliding low, Emma moved with silent speed, closing the distance between her and the threat. She positioned herself between him and the nearest passengers, creating a barrier, forcing him to confront her first before he could endanger anyone else. The man froze, sensing her presence. His posture shifted slightly, alert but not fully aware. Emma knew she had a fraction of a second to act. Her hand brushed the grip of her weapon, hidden under her jacket. She visualized the maneuver, the sweep of her arm, the immobilization technique that would allow her to neutralize him without harming civilians. Then a sudden jolt. The plane hit turbulence harder than before, shaking violently. Phones clattered, coffee cups tipped, and passengers screamed, gripping armrests. Emma's reflexes sharpened instantly. The man stumbled slightly, and she seized the moment. With a controlled, precise motion, she intercepted him, placing herself directly in his path. Her grip controlled his arm, redirecting the weapon away from passengers. A fluid twist and a silent maneuver immobilized him against the seat frame. His surprise was evident, but he was powerless against her trained technique. Passengers were still unaware of the intervention. A child in row 20 whimpered, but none realized how close they had come to real danger. Emma's mind raced ahead. One threat neutralized, the other controlled. But what if there were more? Was this secondary figure the only accomplice? She scanned the cabin, eyes sweeping over each passenger, each shadow, each potential hiding place. The first threat near the cockpit shifted again, straining against her control, but she maintained her grip. The balance of power was delicate. One wrong motion could destabilize the situation entirely. Her muscles tensed, ready to respond instantaneously to any change. Then a faint sound, a subtle footstep behind a row of seats made her pause. Another threat, her pulse surged. She could not take chances. She whispered under her breath, stay focused, protect, observe. Every second was a lifetime, every decision could mean life or death. The secondary threat under her control struggled briefly, eyes darting around, realizing he was overpowered. Emma maintained dominance without aggression, guiding him silently toward containment. The first threat remained immobilized near the cockpit, unable to interfere. The pilot's voice returned over the intercom, calm but tight with tension. Sniper report, is the threat secure? We are on final approach. Lives are counting on you. Emma's jaw tightened. She scanned the cabin again, confirming all passengers remained unharmed. First threat neutralized. Secondary under control, she whispered, eyes sweeping for any additional dangers. Her pulse still raced, but her focus remained razor-sharp. And then a subtle movement at the very rear of the plane, a shadow shifting near the emergency exit. Emma's chest tightened. Could there be another? Her instincts screamed caution. The plane was moments from landing, and any miscalculation now could turn the heroics of the past minutes into a nightmare. She whispered under her breath, more to steel herself than for the threat. Not done. Stay alert. One last move. The cabin held its breath unknowingly, passengers leaning forward, hearts racing from turbulence but oblivious to the full scope of the danger. Emma's eyes never left the potential threat, ready to act instantly if it moved. Her body coiled, muscles ready. The first two threats had been controlled, but she knew better than anyone. This flight was not safe until every last potential danger was accounted for. One shadow, one weapon, one misstep, everything could fall apart. And then, just as the plane began its final descent toward the military airbase, the faint shadow shifted again, revealing a figure moving toward the aisle, just visible under the dim cabin lighting. Emma's pulse spiked. This was the final test. Emma's mind raced as the plane descended, the runway a distant promise of safety. Two threats neutralized, one near the cockpit, one under her control, but her instincts screamed that the danger wasn't over. A subtle shadow at the rear of the cabin shifted again. Her pulse spiked. The final threat was moving, and if she didn't intercept, the entire plane could descend into chaos. She pressed her body low, crouching behind the aisle seats, sliding forward with precision. Every movement had to be calculated. The plane rattled slightly with turbulence, passengers gripping armrests, unaware of the deadly game unfolding just feet from them. A mother whispered softly to her child. A man fumbled with a phone. A young woman adjusted her headphones, but none of them knew the predator closing in. Emma's eyes locked on the shadow near the emergency exit. Small, deliberate steps, hands brushing against the compartments. She recognized the signs of trained intent, careful scanning, controlled breathing, subtle posture adjustments. This wasn't a random hijacker or desperate passenger. This was professional, tactical, dangerous. Her muscles coiled, ready to act. One chance. Precision. Protect. Sliding forward, she positioned herself between the figure and the aisle. Any sudden move from him could endanger the passengers in the rear. She had to act decisively, but quietly. The shadow paused. Emma froze, counting heartbeats. The figure's head shifted slightly, scanning the cabin. He had not yet noticed her, but suspicion lingered. One misstep, one wrong calculation, and the threat could react violently. Emma's hand brushed her concealed weapon, ready to strike but still hidden. The passengers were starting to notice tension. Whispers rose. "What's happening? Is there a problem?" a child cried softly. Emma's mind raced, calculating, every civilian a potential obstacle, every second a risk, every action must be exact. Then the figure moved again, stepping into the aisle closer. His hand brushed against the waistband of his jacket. Emma recognized the subtle metallic glint. Weapon, armed, intent clear. Emma exhaled slowly, aligning her body. She had trained for this moment countless times in drills, high pressure, confined spaces, hostage-like situations, but never above 30,000 feet with innocent civilians oblivious to the danger. Every instinct, every nerve, every calculation converged into a single point: action. She moved with fluid precision, intercepting him mid-step. Her hands grasped his arms in a controlled maneuver, redirecting the weapon away from passengers. The man's eyes widened, realizing too late that he was outmatched. Emma twisted, leveraging her weight and training to immobilize him against the aisle. The turbulence rattled the plane violently, passengers gasping, some screaming. Emma's grip never wavered. Her training demanded control under chaos, and she applied it perfectly. The final threat struggled briefly, but she maintained dominance. She whispered under her breath, "Not a scratch. Keep control. Protect everyone." Behind her, the first two threats remained secured. The cockpit was safe. The plane, now descending toward the military airbase, was almost within reach of safety, but Emma knew better than to relax. One wrong motion, one unexpected reaction, could undo everything. A passenger accidentally dropped a phone, the clatter echoing in the aisle. The final threat flinched, eyes darting. Emma tightened her grip instantly, neutralizing any potential reaction. Her muscles remained coiled, ready for any movement, any attempt at resistance. The pilot's voice cut through the intercom again, calm but urgent. "Delta Force sniper report, threats secured. We're on final approach. Lives are counting on you." Emma's jaw tightened. She scanned the cabin once more, confirming no additional threats. All clear. She whispered under her breath, "This ends now." The final threat realized he had no options. He lunged subtly, but Emma anticipated it perfectly. Her body moved like a trained machine, redirecting him, maintaining control while protecting the aisle. A fluid sweep disarmed him completely. The metallic clink of his weapon hitting the floor echoed through the cabin. Passengers gasped at the sound, looking around, still unaware of the true scale of danger they had narrowly escaped. Emma maintained control, pressing the man gently against the seat frame, ensuring no further movement. Her eyes scanned the cabin. Everyone was unharmed, every life intact. The plane jolted again as turbulence hit, but the cabin remained calm under her influence. Passengers were tense, whispering but unaware of the silent, deadly struggle that had just unfolded around them. Emma's heart pounded, adrenaline still roaring, but she allowed herself a fraction of calm. The worst was over. She turned her attention fully to the pilot. The cockpit door remained secure. The first threat still immobilized, the second under control, the final threat neutralized. Emma's mind raced, replaying the events in precise order, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Her pulse slowly returned to a measured pace, though adrenaline still thrummed through her veins. She had acted decisively, flawlessly, and the plane was now in safe hands. The military airbase was minutes away. Every passenger, oblivious to her presence as the silent guardian, remained unharmed. The final threat struggled one last time, eyes flicking around, realizing the futility of resistance. Emma applied subtle pressure, a final reminder of her control. She whispered softly, a calm but firm command. "Stay down, not another move, understand?" His eyes flicked to her, fear and realization evident. He nodded slightly, immobilized, disarmed, neutralized. Emma exhaled slowly, tension rolling off her shoulders in slow waves. The plane was stabilizing. The descent continued smoothly. The pilot's voice again echoed over the intercom, now tinged with relief. "Delta Force Sniper, excellent work. Continue to maintain control. We are moments from landing safely. Thank you." Emma's mind scanned the cabin one last time. Passengers leaned forward, some stretching, some rubbing eyes from exhaustion. A child clutched a stuffed toy, oblivious to the narrowly avoided disaster. A mother whispered softly to her baby, unaware that her quick embrace had shielded her child from chaos only moments ago. Her eyes lingered on the cockpit. The pilot's hands moved confidently over the controls, guiding the plane down safely. Emma allowed herself a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Mission nearly complete, lives preserved. And then a final, subtle movement at the very back of the cabin. Emma's pulse surged. Another shadow, one final test. She adjusted slightly, muscles still coiled, senses razor-sharp. Her eyes scanned the rear exit, noting positions of all passengers, ensuring that nothing had been overlooked. The plane's wheels touched the runway with a controlled thump, the descent complete. The aircraft taxied smoothly, bringing everyone closer to safety. Yet Emma knew better than to relax completely. The final moments were crucial. She whispered under her breath, "Almost there, one last sweep." Emma's hand brushed her weapon briefly, ready for the slightest unexpected movement. Her eyes scanned every passenger, every aisle, every seat. Calm, poised, precise. She had neutralized the immediate threats, but vigilance remained essential until the plane came to a complete stop. Passengers leaned back, sighing, stretching. Some glanced nervously around. A few whispered questions, trying to make sense of the tension that had filled the cabin during descent. None suspected the full scale of what had just occurred. Emma pressed slightly against the final threat, ensuring compliance. Her eyes flicked to the cockpit once more. The pilot's face, visible through the small window, was taut but relieved. They were moments away from safety. And then, finally, the plane slowed, taxiing toward the gate. Emma remained coiled, aware that danger could still exist until engines were shut down, doors opened, and passengers disembarked. Her eyes never left the cabin. Emma's heart was still racing even as the plane slowed on the taxiway. The engine's roar subsided to a gentle hum, and the scent of recycled air mixed with the faint odor of passengers' sweat and coffee. Hundreds of lives rested on the fragile balance she had maintained, and now the plane had finally touched the earth. But she didn't relax, not yet. Her eyes scanned the cabin, trained to detect every anomaly, every hidden motion. Passengers, oblivious to the deadly struggle they had narrowly avoided, began to stir. Children yawned, adults stretched, some rubbing eyes as though the tension they had felt in the air was just fatigue. Some whispered to one another, confused by the anxiety of the descent. None suspected the silent guardian among them who had held life and death in her hands. Emma kept her hand close to her concealed weapon, body low, eyes sweeping the cabin. The first threat remained immobilized near the cockpit, the second controlled at mid-cabin, and the third neutralized near the emergency exit. Every detail had been accounted for, yet her mind refused to release vigilance. One unexpected movement could undo all she had achieved. The pilot's voice broke through the intercom, calm but authoritative. "Passengers, we are safely on the ground. Please remain seated until the crew instructs you. Thank you for your cooperation." Emma exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, but her muscles remained coiled. Landing was only part of the battle. Ensuring the passengers exited safely and that the threats were secured remained paramount. She shifted slightly, sliding the final threat toward a seat with controlled pressure, ensuring he could not rise or reach for any concealed weapon. The cabin began to buzz with curiosity and tentative relief. Whispers grew louder. What just happened? Why were we so tense? Did anyone see something? Emma's eyes flicked to a few passengers who were closer to noticing. Subtle, careful movements maintained her cover while she ensured compliance among the immobilized threats. The flight attendants moved cautiously, a mixture of awe and nervousness on their faces. They had seen Emma act with precision, though they had no idea of her background. Her calm decisiveness had prevented panic and safeguarded lives, yet she remained a mystery to them. Emma moved down the aisle, keeping the threats controlled, assessing every detail. The passengers remained largely unaware of the silent war that had unfolded around them. Their safety was a testament to her skill and training, but revealing her role now would be complicated. The pilot's voice returned. "Emergency services are on standby. All threats are contained, and law enforcement will board shortly. Please remain calm and seated." Emma's mind raced. She had one final task: secure the threats until authorities could take over. The plane's emergency vehicles began to appear outside the windows, flashing red and blue lights reflected in the polished metal fuselage. She guided the immobilized threats carefully, ensuring that no sudden movements could trigger panic or chaos. Passengers began to notice the flashing lights, murmurs rising. "What's happening outside? Are we under attack?" A few pointed toward the cockpit. Emma's eyes scanned, noting each reaction. The emotional tension in the cabin was thick: fear, relief, curiosity, all mingling in a chaotic but fragile balance. One flight attendant approached her cautiously. Are you okay? What, who?" Her voice trembled with unasked questions. Emma gave a subtle nod, keeping her tone calm. "I'm fine. Everyone is safe. Please help keep the passengers calm until authorities arrive." The first threat, still near the cockpit, struggled against its restraints. Emma pressed slightly, her presence enough to maintain control. The second threat at mid-cabin remained compliant under her guidance, while the third at the rear stayed immobilized. Every detail mattered, every motion calculated. Through the cabin windows, the emergency vehicles drew closer, ready to respond to the landing. Emma's pulse began to slow, but only fractionally. She kept her eyes moving, scanning the passengers, the threats, the exits. Any oversight could be disastrous. A young boy in row 19 finally spoke, clutching his mother's hand. "Mom, why is everyone so scared?" The mother whispered reassurances, but Emma caught the fear in her eyes. The child had no idea how close they had come to danger. Emma's chest tightened. The emotional weight of her silent heroism hit her in a sudden wave. The pilot's voice returned, more relaxed now. "Authorities are boarding. We will begin disembarkation shortly. Everyone is safe. Thank you for your patience." Emma exhaled fully this time, the tension easing though her vigilance remained. She moved carefully through the aisle, ensuring the immobilized threats remained under control, preventing any sudden movement or resistance. The authorities were moments away, and her job was nearly complete. Outside, the flashing lights intensified. The sound of engines from emergency vehicles grew closer, a comforting sign that trained reinforcements were about to take over. Emma prepared herself for the final handoff. Passengers began to notice the organized chaos unfolding. Who's going to get them? Is everything okay? Emma kept her calm demeanor, guiding the authorities quietly to the first threat near the cockpit. Each motion was precise, calculated, ensuring no sudden reaction or panic from the passengers. Finally, law enforcement and tactical teams boarded the plane. Emma's grip relaxed slightly as trained professionals assumed control of the immobilized threats. She observed silently, assessing the transfer, ensuring no slip-ups. Every threat was accounted for, every life protected. The passengers finally began to comprehend the scale of what had occurred. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to gasps. Some began to applaud softly, though none knew the identity of the silent guardian among them. Emma remained in the background, unnoticed by most, yet central to the survival of everyone on board. The flight attendants, finally able to breathe, began assisting passengers in collecting belongings, preparing for orderly disembarkation. Emma allowed herself a subtle smile, though the adrenaline still lingered. The danger had passed, but the impact of the experience would linger in her mind for much longer. As the authorities escorted the threats off the plane, passengers began to ask questions, slowly piecing together fragments of the tension they had felt. Emma remained poised, answering minimally when approached, letting the authorities take the spotlight. She knew her role was to act, not to be recognized. Finally, the last passenger disembarked, a mixture of relief and lingering fear evident on their faces. Emma remained, scanning one last time, ensuring the plane was secure. Her pulse slowed fully now. The storm had passed. She had acted decisively, protected lives, and maintained control under unimaginable pressure. She allowed herself a moment to step back, observing the aftermath. The pilots, crew, and passengers were safe. The plane had landed, the threats neutralized, every life preserved. And yet her work, her identity, remained hidden from all but a select few. Emma whispered softly to herself, a quiet acknowledgement of what had just occurred. "They'll never know, but I did it, all of them safe." And with that, she allowed herself a brief smile, the tension finally giving way to the quiet, profound relief that only comes after surviving a nightmare. The roar of emergency vehicles outside had quieted to a background hum, replaced by the soft shuffle of passengers finally disembarking. Cameras flashed from news crews waiting at the tarmac. Police and tactical units escorted the immobilized threats away, while the air of tension slowly dissolved into a mixture of awe, relief, and disbelief. But amidst the chaos, one figure remained almost unnoticed: Emma, quiet, composed, a ghost of action amidst the visible aftermath. Inside the terminal, the passengers gathered, murmuring anxiously. Mothers clutched children, hands shook, voices quivered. Some were crying. A man in a business suit muttered prayers under his breath. The fear and tension that had gripped them during the flight had transformed into raw, emotional gratitude, though they didn't yet know the full story. Flight attendants, finally able to breathe, began organizing the passengers, ensuring everyone remained calm. But their eyes kept flicking toward Emma, a combination of curiosity and suspicion in their gaze. Something about her composure, the quiet confidence she exuded, marked her as different. She had been in the eye of the storm, yet remained invisible to the passengers who now buzzed with adrenaline and questions. One of the passengers, a young woman clutching her phone, finally approached Emma. "Excuse me, did you?" Her words trailed off, eyes wide. Emma gave a small, composed nod. "Yes," she said quietly, voice calm but firm. "I ensured everyone remained safe." A wave of shock spread across the crowd. Passengers looked at her in disbelief. You saved us," a father asked, voice trembling. His daughter clung to him, wide-eyed. Emma nodded again, modestly. The pilot emerged from the cockpit, his uniform slightly disheveled, eyes scanning the scene. He spotted Emma immediately. Relief and awe crossed his face. Walking toward her, he extended a hand, his voice steady but laden with gratitude. "Ma'am, we owe you everything. You saved every single life aboard that plane." Emma accepted the handshake, her expression composed but serious. "It was my responsibility," she said simply, but the weight of what had occurred, the hundreds of lives she had safeguarded in a matter of minutes, pressed on her. News crews, initially focused on the flashing lights, had noticed the small crowd and the calm, determined woman at the center. Cameras swung toward her, capturing the quiet hero in real time. Reporters moved in, microphones raised. "Miss Ma'am, can you tell us what happened on the flight?" One reporter asked, voice eager, tinged with urgency. Emma's eyes scanned the crowd, assessing the potential risks of revealing classified details. Her voice remained calm, carefully measured. "There were threats aboard. I acted to neutralize them and protect the passengers. Everyone is safe now. That's what matters." The reporters pressed further, but Emma deflected gracefully, her focus on the passengers first. The crowd around her murmured, some incredulous, some tearful. Parents held children tightly, still processing what had just occurred. Among the passengers, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing toward Emma. "Mom, she's our hero. She saved us all." The mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes. The sentiment spread quickly. Applause broke out, soft at first, then swelling into a chorus of gratitude. The pilot spoke again, gesturing toward Emma. "This woman, this Delta Force-trained sniper, she didn't have to act, but she did. Every life on this plane is here because of her skill, her courage, and her composure under unimaginable pressure." Gasps of disbelief ran through the crowd. Passengers glanced at one another, some in shock, some with tears streaming down faces. Cameras clicked, capturing every reaction. The silent hero revealed at last. Emma remained modest, her posture calm, hands folded lightly in front of her. "It wasn't about me," she said softly, voice steady. "It was about everyone aboard. That's all that matters." A mother approached her, eyes wet. "You saved my baby," she whispered. Emma knelt slightly, offering a reassuring nod. The mother pressed her child close, trembling. The intimacy of gratitude, raw and unfiltered, hit Emma deeply. For the first time, she allowed herself a fraction of emotional release. Reporters now circled, eager to capture her story, her face, her presence. Phones lifted for pictures. Social media erupted almost instantly as the first videos of Emma standing quietly amidst the passengers went viral. Hashtags like Delta Force Hero and Plane Saved by Sniper began trending within minutes. People across the country were witnessing the story in real time. The authorities approached, taking control of the threats from Emma. Their acknowledgement was subtle but profound, nods, gestures of respect, a quiet admiration in their eyes. Every motion confirmed what the passengers now understood. This was no ordinary civilian, no ordinary intervention. This was someone extraordinary. Emma finally allowed herself to step back slightly, taking in the scene. The adrenaline, though still coursing, began to ebb. She had moved flawlessly, protected the innocent, neutralized threats, and now, for the first time, she was recognized, not for glory but for action. The passengers slowly began to disembark, still murmuring in amazement. Some hugged each other, others stood frozen in place, trying to process what had happened. Emma's quiet heroism had transformed ordinary travelers into witnesses of something remarkable, something cinematic. A young man, shaking but smiling through tears, approached her. I don't even know your name, but I'll never forget this day. You saved me. You saved all of us." Emma offered a small, acknowledging smile. She didn't need names or thanks. This moment, the impact of her actions was reward enough. As the last passenger exited, Emma turned to the pilot. "Everyone accounted for?" she asked, voice calm. The pilot nodded. "Yes, all safe thanks to you." Outside, cameras captured the plane against the sunset, emergency vehicles lining the runway. Social media feeds exploded with eyewitness accounts, tagging Emma, sharing the story, praising her heroics. Lives had been saved and a nation was watching, inspired. Emma remained a silent figure amid the applause, the flashing cameras, and the waves of gratitude. For her, this wasn't about fame. It was about duty, skill, and courage, qualities she had carried silently for years, now revealed to a world that rarely saw the sacrifices of its protectors. Finally, a young boy ran up, holding a small toy airplane. "For you," he said simply. Emma knelt, accepting the gift with a soft nod. She placed it carefully in her jacket pocket, a reminder that every life mattered and that sometimes heroes worked in silence until the world finally noticed. The pilot spoke one last time, voice carrying over the tarmac. "Today, history witnessed courage, skill, and bravery. This woman ensured everyone aboard would walk away. We owe her everything." Emma exhaled, a gentle smile forming. She had done her duty. Hundreds were alive because of her. Lives were preserved. The nation would know her story, but for her that was secondary. She had acted when it mattered most. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the tarmac in golden light, Emma stepped forward, blending into the crowd, quiet but undeniably heroic. The world had seen her courage, but she remained, as always, ready for the next challenge, the next mission, the next life to protect.